Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Trekyards. Today we have the Prometheus Trekyards team joining you.
What?
Well, we have myself, and of course you, Commander. But we will also have Rick Sternbach joining us for the designing section of the show.
But what do you mean by Prometheus Trekyards team? Because that doesn't.
Well, together we are an incredible team. But you split us all up into our individual 3 components, and we are still pretty fantastic.
This is the worst joke foreshadowing we've ever done, but I get it. And I'm gonna guess. Would this episode happen to be on the USS Prometheus from the Voyager episode Message in a Bottle? Prometheus?
Yes, it would.
I think we all guessed that. Good.
Well, the thumbnail helps, right?
And the name of the episode. Yeah, we pretend like no one knows, but everyone knows. Yeah.
And I know that you are now excited because I happen to know that this is like your most favorite Star Trek ship ever. So let's explore the split, or I guess multiple personality challenge ship that is the USS Prometheus.
Yeah, I love this ship, and I think for most of the time in my love of ships, this is my favorite ship. It sort of goes in and out, but yeah, this is just the iconically classic, my favorite ship. So, the Prometheus class, specifically Prometheus, the prototype NX-59650, was a highly classified Federation starship designed for deep space tactical assignments and was one of the most advanced Starfleet vessels in operation during the latter half of the 24th century. It was so classified that at time of launch, only 4 people in the entire Federation had the knowledge required to operate and pilot the ship. Wow. As well as operate many of the ship's brand new experimental systems.
Wouldn't it have been funnier if there's only 3 people that knew? I'm just saying.
No, because anyway. you've got the captain, you've got the second in command of the main section, and the 2 that can go down.
Cool. Yeah. Well, constructed in the Beta Antares shipyards and launched in 2374, or stardate 50749.5, she measures in at 414 meters long and has 15 decks, with a crew of 175 to 200 personnel.
And in a one appearance, they're mostly Romulans. And to put that size into context, the Sovereign class is 685 meters, the Akira class coming in at 450 meters, the Excelsior class, much older there, at 467. So at 414 meters, the Prometheus is a medium-sized craft for the time, and it's quite a bit larger than Voyager, which obviously is the show it came from, at 344. So not huge.
So the ship had a maximum cruising speed of warp 9.99 and was outfitted with Type 12 phaser strips, consisting of a total of 18 separate phaser arrays or phaser strips.
And one of the amazing things about this episode is we've actually been able to give an access to the original 3D model of the Prometheus used in Voyager. So when we say some of these details, we've actually looked at the model and been able to break it down. So we're going to do that for you in detail you've probably never seen before. So phaser strips, let's break that down. They're large, and normally I would show this on the model, but there's so much to read. I'll show you in CG next to us.
Yeah,
look there. So there are 2 large primary phaser strips on the top and 2 on the bottom of the saucer. 1 small strip either side next to the impulse engines, another 6 on the bottom of the lower part, 4 on its saucer part, and 2 below the deflector on the bottom of the ship. This is complicated. I look forward to editing this. On that same piece, there's another 2 smaller phaser strips on the top, help give that piece coverage after separated. On the top, or middle ship, there are 2 medium-sized phaser strips on the top of its saucer section and 2 smaller ones on the bottom. 18 independent phaser strips. Wow. And 12 of those are out when the ship is in standard flight mode. That is one well-armed ship.
Indeed. She also has 2 forward-facing pulse-fired torpedo launchers in normal configuration and 4 forward launchers in multi-vector assault mode.
The first 2 tubes are in the saucer section, and the second set of 2 tubes are in the top of the secondary hull when separated. It's also worth noting that Prometheus has no visible aft-torpedo tubes, which is pretty unusual for Federation starships of the time.
It has a regenerative shielding system and ablative hull armor, just like the Defiant has, which is essentially a system where the outer layer of hull vaporizes under weapons fire, thereby dissipating energy and protecting the ship's main hull.
She has a total standard armament of 150 quantum torpedoes, 150 regular photon torpedoes, as well as 6 tri-cobalt torpedoes as standard. We saw Voyager use a single tri-cobalt warhead to destroy the Caretaker array in Caretaker. That's the only time we see tri-cobalts, even though they seem very powerful. But this has got 6. Now, we never see the Prometheus use any quantum torpedoes. However, we know she was equipped with them, being the most advanced offensive ship of the day, and mostly defensive. We do see a single photon torpedo being fired from the forward launchers. This implies that both photon and quantum torpedoes can be fired from the same tubes, despite them having different shapes. This is something I'll definitely be asking Rick when he joins us later on. And as you all know, I like weapons, so a question I'm going to ask. Yeah.
But the real beauty and unique feature of this design was by far the multi-vector assault mode that allowed the ship to split into 3 unique parts. This, of course, accounts for the large number of separate phaser arrays, as we've talked about. Each of these smaller craft, known as alpha, beta, and gamma units, were not only quite capable of taking care of themselves, but business as well, because they were each warp capable and armed to the teeth. The ship was essentially its own small armada and purpose-built for tactical assignments and to take on the new Dominion threat.
Another innovation was the installation of holo emitters throughout the ship, which allowed the holographic Doctor and the new experimental EMH Mark II, also prototype, to operate in all crew areas.
The warp drive on this vessel made this class of ship faster than any other starships in the fleet in the mid-2370s. The 4-warp nacelle design was responsible for breaking the old warp speed title, which was previously held by the older Intrepid-class vessels that were capable of warp 9.975, making this the fastest ship in the fleet.
And just to mention, the top speed of the Enterprise E, which we all consider being the flagship, was only warp 9.95. So both the Intrepid and the Prometheus were far faster.
Well, as we know, when we get up those warp scales, that 0.01% is actually quite substantial as far as speed goes.
It's an exponential curve when you get to those higher numbers. So when the next ship, 0.9.999, it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. The Prometheus was designed with an unprecedented level of automation, and this combined with its new tactical systems made this the most powerful combat ship in the Alpha Quadrant. The main advantage of the multi-vector assault design was having the ability to confront an enemy from multiple warp-capable vectors for a formidable surprise attack.
You would have thought you would see this ship more than in the Dominion Wars.
I think it kind of was developed during that time.
I know, but the Defiant was sort of rushed, and the Ares was rushed, and Axanar, obviously not canon, but this is the most tactically capable ship of the time. You would think you'd at least get one in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, this ship only had 1 shuttle bay with a complement of 4 standard shuttles, 1 runabout, and 10 small fighters of an unknown type, because I don't think the Peregrines fit in there, so it might be something else.
Maybe more like a Scorpion fighter, like 2-person kind of small.
I mean, it's a prototype. Why wouldn't they have a prototype fighter?
Exactly. After the ship had split into its 3 main components, which took just over 10 seconds to complete, it essentially acted as a mini squadron and coordinated a 3-pronged assault on a target. During the separation procedure, blue warning lights flashed throughout the ship to alert crew members of the separation procedure. Each section was by default operated remotely by the ship's new sophisticated tactical computer, which was based on the main bridge of the Alpha ship. Once the ship had separated, the computer requested an attack pattern and a target. Several pre-programmed attack patterns were integrated into the ship's computers to choose from. However, each part could also be manually controlled by an experienced tactical officer if needed. So the ship was capable of operating with a skeleton crew or in emergency situations.
I know obviously by this point computers are far more reliable, but I think standard operating procedure would be to be manual, when obviously more than 4 people can pilot the ship.
Absolutely.
But I can't see it being every time attack pattern alpha, otherwise why not just send it as a drone ship? Almost. But I'd love to see then what the finest newly trained officers can do with this 3, because I mean in the show we see it do some amazing acrobatics and some really great maneuvers. What can a truly trained crew do that? I'd love to see that. Again, CBS fan series Prometheus, go. The Prometheus was first field tested on the edge of Federation space in 2374. Not the safest place, but oh well. During the tests, however, a team of 27 Romulan operatives, led by Commander Rakar, took control of the ship and killed the small Starfleet crew. The ship was pursued by the USS Bonchoon, a Nebula class, but by using the new multi-vector assault capabilities of the Prometheus, the Romulans soon overpowered the ship and proceeded to Romulan space to hand her over to the Romulan Tal Shiar. That would not be good. But Voyager's EMH, the heroic Doctor, joined forces with the experimental Mark II, amazing scenes, and soon regained control of the ship. and after the ship's safe return home, however, Starfleet rushed the construction of two further vessels, the USS Cerberus and the USS Hercules, to completion. Both these vessels were in service by late 2375, and we saw one of these in the Voyager finale Endgame.
One of the biggest challenges faced by the Starfleet Advanced Starship Design Bureau when designing this ship was the introduction of the 3 reaction chambers. The design allowed the main warp core to split. During normal operations, matter was fed at the top of the core and antimatter at the bottom. The fuel stream then passed directly through the upper and lower reaction chambers before continuing to their meeting point in a conventional central reaction chamber. The central reaction chamber lay on a separation plane which was shut down when the ship split. Additional matter and antimatter feeds were then activated to feed the now independent reaction chamber.
Sounds very complicated.
It does, yes.
But I'm glad they thought about it. When separated, the primary hull operated using independent horizontal Defiant-style warp core, which was kept in hot standby mode until it was needed, while the combined warp cores were able to operate on a level of efficiency comparable to, and in fact in excess of, any contemporary starship. In separated mode, it did lose a large degree of efficiency, but could still maintain high warp speeds, almost as efficient as combined, but just not the same length of time. The main hull or saucer section used twin retractable warp nacelles, which were positioned above and below the hull, rather on the sides. Only the upper nacelle was visible while the ship was in the combined mode. And we do know that this top section can engage into warp separately, but at a much slower speed. So even though they're titsy and small, still warp capable, and they're mostly warp sustainers, I believe is the design term, so that when the thing separates, it can fully contain and stay at the same speed, because obviously it'd be pretty useless if it suddenly went...
we talk about that more with Rick, though, I think.
Yeah.
By the early 25th century, or Star Trek Online, the design had spawned several subclasses. The Phoenix, the Hephaestus, and the Cerberus classes remained in service well into the 26th century, as we see a Prometheus class fight in the Battle of Procyon 5 that we see in the Enterprise episode Azadi Prime, when Archer is brought aboard the Enterprise J well into the future.
Great episode.
We assume, yeah, it is. We assume that once the ship was developed enough, larger versions would be constructed and produced, as well as maybe scaled up in terms of firepower and abilities, if the design proved itself successful. As far as Star Trek Online goes, there is the advanced escort version, as well as the battleship version. So I kind of think that maybe the battleship version might be slightly larger sized. And worth noting, too, that some of these later ships were fitted with 4 pulse phaser cannons, similar to those on board the Defiant, in addition to the standard weapons complement.
That's a meaty ship. Confusingly, Starfleet seems to have more than one starship called the USS Prometheus, as well as the experimental ship we're talking about now. There's a Nebula class that appeared in the TNG episode Second Sight. We assume this earlier vessel was destroyed, probably again during the Dominion War, leaving the name free to be used for this new amazing prototype.
Yeah, and we know that names often change classes, as we see in the Defiant.
Yeah.
It used to be a Connie, and now it's Defiant, I guess, class. Anyway, the Prometheus also has 2 different registry numbers in the episode Message in a Bottle. Though one on the hull clearly says NX 59650, but inside the ship, the displays all say NX 74913. This was a result of some confusion between the visual effects department and the scenic art departments. Registries are normally sequential, so the higher they are, the later the ship was commissioned. The scenic art department figured that that meant the Prometheus should have a very high registry number, whereas the visual effects team used a lower registry number to imply that the ship had been in development for quite a while.
Yeah, there's always a problem with registry numbers, because while the theory of their increasing number is the reason, we know that lots of the time, and in First Contact, some of the numbers were done because of a family's birthday or some personal meaning rather than specifically in canon. So while you can stick to the rule in general that registry numbers, this itself says there's 2, and as such, I think you can't always go by registry numbers. You've got to go by other factors as well.
Exactly. You see that in TOS as well. Like the Constitution was 1700, but yet the Constellation in Doomsday Machine was like 1071 or 1017. I can't remember which.
It's even though it's canonical, they don't always make sense, and so I wouldn't take that as the be all of Starship timeline.
No. I never thought that was the case with registry numbers. So
no. But with all this talk about behind the scenes and whatnot, gets me thinking it's time to call in our resident designer and genius, Rick Sternbach, to clear up a few things and take on this whole design process, which for this very clearly fan favorite ship. So everyone, please welcome the one and only Mr. Rick Sternbach.
Hey Rick, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here as always.
All right, let's go back, way back to 1997. When did you first hear about this new ship called the Prometheus, and what were you told about it, and what were your first initial thoughts?
Well, I mean, the first inkling we had was when we got the script. It was supposed to break apart into 5 sections. Okay, that was the multi-vector attack mode feature of the ship. Brand new, super secret. The initial sketches that I did, there's a bit of time where I had to really kind of figure out, all right, how am I going to bust this into parts? And they would each need warp capability.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. My initial doodles were really of a fairly standard looking ship. It was slightly pointy. Actually, it ended up being very pointy. An engineering hull, 2 sets of pylons, and 2 sets of nacelles. Okay. Now, I mean, Stargazer had that, so nothing terribly unusual there. But to have the ship break into 5 pieces and fly around like a swarm of angry hornets, that was a bit of a challenge.
Well, first of all, Rick, I've got to say, this is has consistently been my most favourite Star Trek design always. So I'd like to say a big thank you to you for designing such a fantastic ship.
Very good, thank you.
Anyway, fan moment over there.
That's fine.
So, like you said, initially it was meant to separate into 5 distinct ships instead of the 3 we saw on screen. Do you think the separation angle actually made sense in terms of the Trek universe? And obviously, how did you then go about designing a ship that could separate into 5 distinct pieces?
Well, the Enterprise D, could operate as 2 completely separate spacecraft. If 2 is good, 5 must be really good. The producers, though,
that's actually the motto for the ship. If 2 is good,
yes.
5 is.
So separated operations is not new. One of the production meetings, they decided, okay, this was going to look like really a swarm of toys popping apart and popping back together. They certainly did not want this to look like that, popular set of robot toys that broke into pieces and came back together. So they limited the. Yes, I see that thing on your wall. They limited the number of separated spacecraft to 3. Okay, and 3 actually made a lot of sense. With 5, I had the forward hull, the 2 aft hulls, and then 2 pieces attached to the forward hull, 1 on top and 1 on the bottom. Okay, that would separate, almost like a captain's yacht and
another captain's yacht.
A flyable bridge module. Okay, with guns. I think that would have been a nightmare for visual effects. But they said, okay, break this into 3 sections. So I did a number of doodles. I did a few very rough computer polygon models just to show them what breaking this thing up would look like. Incrementally, I got approvals. Okay, this looks good. This looks good. Okay, let's do this. The overall look of the ship, it got nailed for me. Pretty nicely.
For the ship to separate into separate yet capable vessels would require a lot of functionality and redundancies. How did you approach and envision the ship in terms of its capabilities for each part? So conceptually, was each part designed to perform a specific duty or function that would work in conjunction with all the other ones?
Each separate component would have to have its own warp capability. It would have to function as a complete ship and as 3 separate ships. What does that do to the engineering? Well, you have lots of connections to be made. The top and bottom engineering hulls, the things that I labeled as upper warp hull, lower warp hull, each section would have to have everything that a good Starfleet ship needs to have.
So how did you approach a shape? Why this shape in particular? And we know you said they wanted to be an advanced prototype, but what do you do stylistically and detail-wise to push forward the Federation aesthetic and also at the same time fit into a battleship role, maybe?
I elongated the forward hull on Voyager. And I simply took that to a little bit more of an extreme point. I like the look of things like a throwing knife, which looks very dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, again, the pointiness of a science fiction ship, really says, okay, this thing is fast. This thing is dangerous. On one of my sketches, I drew a little cup of coffee and I said, this is a stylistic blend. It had elements of a number of different ships, okay, including the Enterprise E. John Eaves had done a wonderful job with the Sovereign class. And, there are bits and pieces on Prometheus that could have come from the Enterprise E construction yards.